Donald Trump is convinced that discussions concerning Russia and Ukraine are going pretty well. This comes in a stark contrast to President Zelensky's aide's comments that the American peace plan consisting of mutual concessions is a failure. And to talk about peace prospects in Ukraine, we're joined by Ukrainian MP Yevheniia Kravchuk. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, first of all, how do you rate American efforts in negotiating peace in Ukraine so far?
Well, first of all, we are happy that America is involved in this negotiation. We, of course, would like to see more details and to have a meeting with representatives of Trump administration in Kiev, in Ukraine, with our team. Remember, in 2015, when we had a ceasefire, United States were not at the table, just Germany and France, and at the end of the day, it didn't work out. So obviously, we do need United States to be involved. But also, I think that Europe has to take a more active role, because it's still a security on European continent, and European countries should be involved and should know how these negotiations go. So far, we haven't seen any details of the plan, but of course, Ukraine is the country that wants peace, most of it.
But don't you think that Ukraine should be involved in the peace talks?
Of course, I mean, without
because
Ukraine...
President Zelenskyy seemed genuinely surprised by the statement of Donald Trump.
Well, we haven't heard any details from Donald Trump as well, so we do, we're thankful for the efforts, but any peace without Ukrainian interest and Ukraine in it will not be long-lasting, because that's us who will be staying on the territory. That's people of Ukraine who are fighting and people of Ukraine who are suffering. And Russia is not going anywhere from the place where it is.
To what demands can will Ukraine not agree to, and where is there still some space for concessions?
Well, first of all, I think it's not just Ukraine, but the whole global order, and the respect for the sovereignty and the borders of sovereign countries should be respected, because, other countries will go in jeopardy, and other empires, especially with nuclear power, will be just, playing cards and games in other places around the world. Of course, Ukraine cannot recognize any of the occupied territories as Russian territory. That's for sure. Obviously, not all of the territories can be, conquered or deoccupied by the military power, at least at this point of the time. We still hold part of Kursk region, which is sovereign territory of Russia. So obviously, we do not need these territories. So that could be one of the arguments during the negotiations. And of course, and it's not just Ukrainian interest; it's interest of Europe and our allies, is the security guarantees and of non-repetition. Because if we're not speaking about just a ceasefire, we had ceasefire in 2015, and 7 years later, it's full-scale invasion. So
let me then interrupt you here and quote NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. I can't describe to you exactly how these talks will go. I already have ideas about what this composition could look like, but we don't want to make Putin any smarter than he already is. We are making it a little secret. Only the end is certain. Putin will never try again after this. So, what do you think Mark Rutte was talking about when he said that he will prevent Russia from attacking Ukraine for good?
Well, obviously, for Russia, it has to be very painful to attack again. And that means right now we have to think about even more sanctions on Russia to make it weaker, rather than thinking about lifting the sanctions. And I'm talking now about the Polish presidency during the 16th package of EU, which will come, I think, in 24th of February to the third, year of the full-scale invasion. Because Russia has to understand that it's going to be painful both economically and militarily if they will attack a sovereign country. And of course, these security guarantees, for us, the best way is to be in NATO, and that's what President Zelenskyy was speaking, that it's going to be even cheaper for everyone to accept Ukraine in NATO. But we understand that not all countries will say yes, at least at this point. So it has to be obviously the security guarantees of the countries that are key players, at least in NATO, to make sure that Russia will not dare to attack a sovereign country.
Yes, but to obtain security guarantees, first you have to reach a ceasefire. But what to make Vladimir Putin enter negotiations?
Well, actually, it's a good question, because right now it doesn't look like that Russia wants these peace negotiations, and probably will try to, to send some signals to Trump. And obviously, Putin doesn't want to look weak and say that, because what he's telling to his people: we are fighting West. We're not fighting Ukraine. Look at the map. How small is Ukraine and how big is Russia? And yet, on the third year of the full-scale invasion, Russia had not been able even to conquer the whole Donetsk region. That was not just the aim of the first 3 days. They wanted to be in Kiev in the first 3 days. So obviously the aim of Putin is to not to have negotiations with Ukraine, but saying that we're doing the deal with Trump, and we'll be at the table of negotiations again. And I think that it's in our common interest not to let Vladimir Putin look good in this at the end of the day.
So far it's on freeze, but what would the loss of US aid support mean for Ukraine?
I will tell you this. Since 2022, we increased our own military productions in many times. Right now, 40% of everything we use on the battlefield, and I mean everything, 155 calibers, own production of mines, or even howitzers, we do it by ourselves. Something, of course, we cannot do, such as Patriots. We cannot produce our own Patriots, the air defense. So obviously that would be a huge loss for Ukrainian cities, for civilians, not to have something to be protected from Russian missiles. Other 30% comes from Europe, and other 30% comes from United States. So we really hope that the aid will not be stopped. But of course, our aim is to be more and more efficient in producing the military, to increase the military production, especially drones and artillery.
The US wants Ukraine to hold elections this year, obviously after a ceasefire is reached. Do you think that Washington would like to see someone else at the helm of the country but Volodymyr Zelenskyy?
Since we are a democratic country, it's for Ukrainian people to decide who they elect. And about the elections, the first step is not to have a war and then have elections. And when we're speaking about Vladimir Putin, they never had normal elections in 20+ years. He has been a president or prime minister, but still a ruler of United States, of the Russian Federation. And at this time, we had 5 Ukrainian presidents changing. That's democracy, and they do not have democracy. And they had elections, sham election on the occupied territories. So I guess the big question is to what he represents. Does he represent Russian people, or he just reappoints himself every 4 or 5 years, as Lukashenko does? But at the end of the day, of course, Ukraine will have elections, both presidential, parliamentary elections, because we are a democratic country. But when we have missiles crashing to the cities, when we have 1 million, almost 1 million people in the army and cannot participate in elections, well, the first thing is to have the end of this war and to end it with the long-term peace. Because the ceasefire, just for ceasefire and to hold elections, that sounds like sort of something written in Kremlin.
And hundreds of citizens of Ukrainians would not be allowed to take part in the elections, as they would be under Russian domination, still in the east, right?
Of course, in 2015, we had elections and some of the territories were occupied. But first, it wasn't the full-scale invasion, and those people who were on the occupied territories, if they reach the territory of Ukraine, which is under control of Kiev, they can, of course, vote. But we have, 7.5 or 8 million people outside of Ukraine, not in occupied territories. I mean, here, Poland, Germany, Czech Republic, and there should be a way for them to vote. And our consular services, of course, will not be able to accommodate this number of people. That's another question we have to find a solution for.
Therefore, do you think there will be an election in Ukraine this year?
I don't know. Will be a peace in Ukraine this year?
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Yevheniia Kravchuk, Ukrainian MP, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much. Pleasure. As always, and thank you for watching, and stay with us for much more news and comments here on TVP World.